guys, Mike V from Reliable Automotive Equipment. Today we're going to be going over one of the world's leading spot welders, the Wielander Schill GT Spot Welder. The GT spot welding machine does a great job. It's an automatic machine. It's also capable of doing manual settings too. Power up, the main switch is on the back part of the machine here. We turn that on. This one here is just emergency stop only. Don't use that for your main off and on switch. That's only if case of emergency. So when the screen comes up here, we basically have two symbols on the front. One is a little hurricane symbol and one is a hand, meaning for manual settings. So the hurricane means everything's just going to be automatic and just go right through it. So if we follow right down below that, push button number 2, that'll get us into another screen. This is an automatic system. This will automatically measure the thickness of material that you're going through. It will also shoot a small electrical charge to check resistance of the material to see if it's high strength or ultra high strength. It will compute the weld and then shoot the weld through it. But when we first start out, when we first turn the machine on, or if we change out tips or if we change out arms, we have to zero out the piece coming out so it knows where dead stop is. So if we go to 0 and highlight that, what we're going to do, connect air to the machine on the back. Button on the bottom here is the trigger button. When that's on 0, we're going to pull this and hold it. It's not going to weld. All it's going to do is this piece here is going to come out. I'm still going to hold the button until it comes back on its own. So what this has done by this coming out and pressing on this arm, each arm is going to have just a little bit of flex to it, and it finds the dead end travel or the 0 point where it's true 0. So now anything that we put in between there, when this piece comes out, it'll actually measure the thickness of the material and compute the weld. So once we've done that, if you look at the screen, it's automatically highlighted where it says single. And that means now when it's locked on single, every single weld that you take is going to measure that particular piece and select the correct weld. So that's important when you're doing a quarter panel, you're coming down double panel, you hit the lock pillar area, you go to triple, it's automatically going to recompute the weld to a triple panel weld. You don't have to stop and do anything with it. So I want to take 2 panels here, and I'm going to do a little test weld. Do a weld here. We're going to let that come out. So you hear the machine make the weld. Now I'm still holding the button, so you let the machine cycle through. So when you have the weld on it, it looks like that. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick destructive test on this. And I just want to see if I can pull this apart and have it come apart the correct way. So you can put this in a vise and peel it back. We can just rock this back and forth. And the purpose of this is trying to see if the nugget will come out or if it's a bad weld. So when we take this out, we actually see that we have a hole in the panel. And the center of the weld is staying in the center of the weld. So you're always supposed to have, your weld is supposed to be stronger than the panel that you're welding on. So what this proves is that our machine is working 100%. Some shops will actually take a picture of this, put it into the file, and have it as documentation that the machine has been checked before the welds have been done. So once we know that we have a good weld on that, we can continue on. Let's just talk a little bit about preparation. So in reality, you should have all 4 sides clean on the panel that you're going to be welding. If you are trying to weld through black primer on a new quarter panel and you have it over your part over there, it will weld through it, but you will not have a complete weld, because it's going to spend half the time making the weld trying to burn away that product that's in there. So what you are supposed to do is clean all 4 sides. Do not clean them crazy so you're actually removing E-coat. Black primer is basically transport primer to get it from the factory to you. Just clean off the black primer. Don't keep on cleaning it off. Take a little roll-lock disc, clean it off, then use a good quality weld-through primer. The 2 surfaces that are going to touch, make sure your primer goes on properly and let it dry. Do not put it together wet. So when we put the panels together, today I'm just doing demo pieces. We've done this with weld-through primer on it. It welds fantastic through it. It's designed to be welded through. So when we do the weld, we're just going to go through double panel. Okay, so did just what it did before. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to add on a panel. And if we want to look up here, we can just see that it welded on program number 2. So now when we go to triple panel, you can hear it weld a little bit longer. The weld looks a little bit bigger. And if we look up here, it's now on program 3. So it's automatically selecting it based on the thickness and the type of metal that it's going for. So if we want to go to 4 panel, so same result. Bigger weld, which it should be as the thicker panels that you get into. And if we look on here, we're actually on program number 5. So the machine does a great job on measuring the thickness, measuring the type of material, and then selecting the weld for it to correctly go through. So pretty simple as far as that goes. Here's a couple of basics on the machine itself. So let's talk about the automatic system versus the manual system, because there are going to be times when you do have to do some manual settings on the system where automatic mode will not work for it. So for this, we have the way that these tips are set up in here. So the round profile on this tip is called an automatic tip. And what happens is that when this tip comes in contact with another one of the same, it can compute in the automatic mode. If we go into something that has a little bit different size tip on it, like this little tip up in here, it will not compute automatically. This is something that we'll have to go in and do a manual setting. And it's very simple to do that. So on our front screen here, there's a picture of the hand and the little hurricane symbol. If I push that, we'll get back to the main menu. I can go underneath where the little hand symbol is, push that, and now it's going to put us into a screen where we can actually set the thickness of the metal. In order to set the thickness of the metal, to turn the knob, these two little arrows indicating here, if I push that, that will highlight the thickness right there. Our little model there shows the total thickness of material that we're going through. This is less than 1.5 millimeters. The next one would be 1.6 to 2. The next would be 2.1 to 2.6, so forth, all the way above 6 millimeters of stack. And what this does, this is actually setting your amperage, your seconds, and the amount of pressure that's going to be applied on the gun to create the correct weld. Because these tips are smaller, they will not compute the same information back when these tips go against one another to create the automatic setting. That's why on these, if you do these in an automatic mode, it's going to give a false reading to the machine and you're not going to get a correct weld coming out of it. So very simply, in your listing of gun arm accessories, on this little chart here, the little symbols down here tell you if you can use these arm assemblies in automatic mode or if you need to do manual. So it's a very simple reference point to tell you what needs to be done for which arm assembly. But basically on this setup, when you have automatic tip going to automatic tip, you're good in the automatic mode. The only thing you do have to remember is do your calibration every time you turn the machine on, anytime you change tips out, and anytime that you change out an arm assembly. So to change out arm assemblies, you hear the water running right now. The water is going through the arm assembly. So all I'm going to do is just disconnect the air. You hear the pump stop. I can take this apart. We're not going to have water leaking out because there are little valves in there just like an air hose. But if I take this arm out right now, I've closed the circuit off for the water going through and it won't be able to pump through. So to take the arm assembly out, if I pull out this little piece here, pull the arm out. Little fittings, water fittings are up in here and inside the machine. This is the arm assembly. All this does is just go through here and it holds that piece in. You don't have to crank down on this when you put the piece back in. This piece here will just slide right on in. And when you just push it in, if this piece doesn't go through, just give it a little bit of a smack so it lines up. Everything is lined up. So a little bit of maintenance on this. There's a little coating on this right here. It's the actual grease. It's called dielectric grease. It's actually a grease that conducts electricity. You can get it at any local hardware store, but after a little bit of time of taking arms off and on and have them sitting around, you'll get dust build up on them. It starts getting a little jammed up trying to get the arm in and out. Take a little bit of wax and grease remover, a little bit of pre-cleano, clean off the residue on it, clean off the inside. If you have any obstruction in the way, you can take a little bit of sandpaper, a little bit of 180, clean the system out so that this piece here slides in and out nicely. And when you're done, put a little bit more dielectric grease on it. So it's a little bit of maintenance on the machine. If you notice that the arm's getting a little tight coming in and out, take the time out to get it clean. So when we change out arms, we have another little piece in here. If you flip this black lever over, we're able just to drop that down so you can get into a tighter area where you're going to be welding, flip it back up, turn the piece around, and then it locks it in again. Some of the arms are very simple. This arm assembly will just change out. We'll work with this with no problem. This gives you a little bit more depth in between of what you're going to weld. We have the bigger arms on the side. Same thing, just swap them out. Now you have more depth going in. Same thing for the bigger arm. We have this one that we were talking about with a little bit smaller tip that goes on a manual setting. This is actually going to go right up into here. So when we change this out, same thing here, we just loosen up this one. Don't have to take that one all the way out. This one here, this little lineup pin comes out. Piece comes out. Same thing on this. This has a little groove in it, little spot on the back for the Allen wrench. So we're going to drop this down, put this piece in, line it up, snug this one here up. So now when this goes up, your weld actually goes through here, up into here, and that's where you make your spot weld. So that's for doing a wheelhouse area. This is where you would hook it up on the end, have the gun hang upside down. That'll put your piece right up where you want it into the wheel well, make your welds on it, change it back out again. This is basically, remember, cooling on this, you don't have the cooling capability up here like you do on the other arm assembly. This goes all the way up to the tip. This only goes up to about here. So this is used to make your spot welds on the wheelhouse and then change back out to the normal arm again. So we have a couple of things here that actually get changed out with these pieces on the arm assembly. So if we take, if I want to pull this piece here out, I loosen up this Allen screw. I take this one here out. Let me explain a couple things on what this actually does. So this lineup pin here, this has a little groove in it that this lineup pin is just going to set in front of. That's all it does. This does not set height though. So when we put this in, and the little set screw is going to come back in here and do the final setting. So when I go to put this in, this pin will give me direction of where it should be, and we still have a little bit of movement here. So if I take this pin, do not over tighten this pin. We're just going to bring that in there. Now what I want to do is I want to line up my tips so that they are in line with one another. One's not too high, one's not too low, and it's lined up in this direction. Once I have that, then I can snug this up. Don't over tighten. Make sure this one here is snug, and that's it. And that just takes all the play out of it and lines up the tip so that you're having center of the tip to the center of the tip. But this is what the inside of the tip arm looks like, is that water goes up through the center tube, circulates up into the tip, and then it flows back around it and comes back through the gun assembly. So there's a couple things here that we can change out on this assembly. Is if I want to go to a little bit tighter clearance, I can put this one here in and change this piece here out, and I can move my whole welding surface back to this area. So this gives you a lot less clearance to get into a tighter area to make the weld assembly. So there's several different things here that you can change out. We have a set of arms here that this will actually bolt onto here. This piece will set into here, and now you have more depth available in here, and you have a nice smaller area of trying to get into a more of a specialty kind of weld in a really tight area. The best arms to use on the system is the smaller of the C arms, and any of these combination of these pieces on here give you the strongest possible weld. On this chart that we talked about before, you'll see the green and the reds on it, and this will also tell you what arms can take the most amount of strength. And as we get into some of the bigger arms, as it gets into the higher areas, you lose some strength on it because of flex on the arm. So the strongest ones are these two right here, this setup with this fitting and this setup with this fitting here. So they'll give you the best welds that you have on that. Changing tips out, very simple. If you can see in there how hollow that they are, the meat of the tip is right on the edge. We have a, you can take a pair of channel locks on it, or they do make a special wrench that will lock into the end of it. And all you're going to do is just take the end of the tip and just turn it about 1/8 of an inch and it'll pop right off. This is a little tapered shaft that goes in there. Put your new tip on, you're good to go. Do not file the tips. Do not grind the tips. When you start taking away material from this tip, in the first place, you're not going to retain that profile exactly the way that it is. The second place, when you start removing material from the tip, remember it's hollow on the inside. You have less material now, and every time this comes out to make a weld, it's going to be flattening out that tip even more. It's going to be overreaching the piston for what it was not designed for, and you're going to start having issues with the system. So use the system the way that it was designed. This is the cheapest insurance policy for making sure that your equipment keeps working. So they're very reasonably priced. Change them as you need them. If you get a lot of sparks flying around on your material and it starts getting jammed into the tip, if you can't clean it off with a piece of 180 sandpaper, change the tip. The cleaner that you prep your metal for doing the spot welds, the better your spot welds will come out, the less wear and tear you have on the tips, and the longer life that you'll get out of them. So, preparation of the panel. If you have panels that you're going to put together and they don't meet one another, this is not designed as a pair of vice grips. This will actually squeeze it together, but when the weld starts to weld and it heats up, these panels are going to want to separate again, and that's when you're going to have a big blowout. So take a pair of vice grips, clamp the panels flat, do your spot weld, you'll have a secure weld at that point. Make sure that the metal is clean, make sure you don't have primer in there, you don't have glue residue. The cleaner that the panel is, the better of path to ground that the machine will have, the cleaner your spot welds will come out. The other thing we need to talk about is the isolation strap on the hoist. The gun assembly has some weight to it because transformer is in here and diode block is in there. All the new generation spot welders have the same setup because they're doing a primary charge through here and making the major amount of voltage and amperage coming out here at the transformer area. We have some weight on the gun assembly. So we have this little pull down piece. We clip into there. This strap needs to be in between the two. This is called isolation strap, so there's no chance of any grounding out through this cable. So this strap is on here when we're on the short pull assembly. When we add the additional pull, we want to get up higher if you're doing the side of a van or a roof panel, then we would have a longer strap that would hang down so you could still use everything like you need to. Be careful on when you have the additional pull on there and you have the piece out and you're trying to pull the whole gun assembly out. That's why they have the little longer outriggers on here to help keep the machine from falling over. But when you have that amount of height coming off of it, just use a little common sense. Roll the machine over to where you're working instead of trying to pull it out. You can actually make this zero weight. The more that you tighten this, the more you can actually have this hang up in the air. So when you're using this to help with your welding, when you go to turn it, it's a little bit of a hassle. So if we just loosen this up, turn the gun where you want it, and then hold it, it makes it so much simpler. And on the back side here, there's another hook back here so you can actually hang the gun upside down. Okay guys, that is basic operation of the machine. And then we're going to go into how to just check the flow of how it's going. So you can hear the pump running. These two hoses here has water coming out of the blue one, returning on the red one. So the way that this sounds right now, this is a good normal pumping mode. As the machine goes through a period of time with the water that's inside of it, it needs to have maintenance done on it. So within 9 to 12 months out, depending on how much usage you have on the machine, you want to have the machine serviced where it comes apart, clean the system out, blow out all the lines. If you are welding with it and you get an overheat signal, that means that the cooling water is not going through the way that it should. So an easy way of taking care of this, if I disconnect here, this blue one is pretty much an open connection, but if I disconnect here on the red one, it's a closed coupler. So if I just stick this back on, and now push in on the blue washer, pull out the red hose, I actually have an open hose right now. So I can just very simply, and be careful doing this, guys. We're going to blow a little bit of air through here. So I want to see how the flow is coming out. So if I start running air through here, so I can run it through that way, I can see what kind of stuff is coming out, how clean the water is or how dirty the water is. Shoot it back the other way. And what you're going to do here is you're just going to keep working this back and forth and getting the whatever crud is in there so you have nice water flow coming out on this. So it's a real simple trick, and by taking the hoses apart this way, you're not going to mess anything up trying to plug them back in again, because this one is only going to go into here, and then this one here is just going to plug back into here. And that's a real simple trick for cleaning out the system. That also lets you know that if you're starting to get to that point, it's time for a maintenance on the machine. All right, guys, that kind of wraps up about the machine, going over how to operate, how to do some maintenance on it. If you guys have any questions, want more information, get us on the website or give us a call. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.